We're very excited about this plane. We're pretty confident this is the one. It sounds from the cheers down there at the airport that it is the one touching back down on home soil. Let's just listen in for 3 moments. Enormous excitement from the fans down there. And we haven't actually been able to see them yet, Katie, but we understand that there are hundreds of fans down there. We could just see, I think, a glimpse of some of them from the perimeter fence as that plane was landing. And we've talked a bit about some of the characters in the team, but of course it would be remiss of us to not talk about Serena Wiegmann. I mean, a 3rd European victory. This woman can do no wrong, can she?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's probably the only time it's socially acceptable to clap when a plane lands, because I know that's a very divisive thing to do. But yes, Serena it's hard to know what else to say about her at this point. And the FA's CEO, Mark Bullingham, probably put it best when he said she's not for sale at any cost, because she is probably the greatest asset that they've got at this point. But I think sometimes we focus maybe overly on Serena Wiegmann and we kind of forget the dedication of the Lionesses' parents in encouraging them on this pathway when there wasn't necessarily a clear route to being a professional footballer, and obviously the work of academies and centre of excellences and all these different elements and good youth teams that have come together to really create a golden period for English women's football, because it's not surprising that a lot of these players have been graduated from successful England youth teams, for example. So it does feel like a lot of things are all coming together to make one really successful thing. But yeah, Serena Wiegmann is difficult to know what to say about her. I mean, 5 major tournament finals, 3 back-to-back Euros wins is just beyond impressive, and I think that she has demonstrated that she's got a very ruthless and pragmatic side, but also a very motherly side, and she's also demonstrated that tactically people might criticise her team selections, but she's been able to use those substitutes in a really calculated way, and that's another strength that she's had in her armoury that she's been able to use to really effective ends.
It's lovely, actually, that you mentioned parents, because I think they often get forgotten about in high-end sport. But of course, all of the people that are doing this amazing role now will have had somebody, as you say, getting up early in the morning, ferrying them to football pitches, standing on the sidelines in the drizzle in the winter, watching them up to their knees. Of course, Bethany's dad has tweeted today to all the snipers out there criticising women's football. Guess what? My daughter is a double European champion. How many people can say that? Well done, Lionesses. It is just a fantastic moment for these families as well, isn't it?
It is, and I think the real crucial thing that strikes me when I look at their journeys, and we did a piece on The Athletic speaking to them about this, is just the fact that they had that level of devotion when there wasn't a pathway for women's football. It's not like in men's football where it was you put all of this effort in for a promise of your kid makes it at the top, they're financially made for life. There was no professional league. It was very, very uncertain future. Yet they did all of this because it was what their kids wanted to do. And given the shortage of women's teams and the number of maybe Premier League clubs that didn't have a women's team or an academy, they were having to drive, some of them for 4-hour round trips several times a week to take the kids to training. That was what Georgia Stanway's family had to do to drive her from Barrow to Blackburn, and then they had to let her go when she was still in a kind of mid-teens to go and play professionally for Manchester City. So those are the kind of things that are maybe not seen, because obviously it happened way before the profile of women's football was as it is now, but they're also very private, tender family moments. But I think that real resilience and drive to do that when there wasn't a guarantee that it would lead anywhere is just such a real significant, crucial part of the story. And I think that those families now, although they never expected it to blow up like this, will surely just be thinking it's paid off in the biggest way.
Look at that, look at the fire trucks spurting water over the plane. I assume that's in some kind of celebration, not because they're worried at all about the plane. But we can also see the fans down there as well with their flags cheering them all on, Katie. And you're saying that no pathway to women's football really in the past. That is changing, isn't it? You know, you've got clubs like Arsenal that seem to have really, really strong pathways now. How widespread is that now becoming amongst all of the big Premier League teams?
I think it's a real mixed picture. I think at the top of the WSL you have teams who are investing really seriously in this, and they're allowing their women's teams to regularly fill their main stadium. Obviously you've seen Arsenal women will now be moving to the Emirates full time, and that is obviously an enormous step forward for the women's game, but it's still something that's very much hinging on, I think, the Lionesses effect. It's still the teams who have the most Lionesses that are flourishing commercially. It's still the players who are in that squad that are flourishing commercially. There are lots of Premier League teams whose women's teams are semi-professional or part-time or paying to play or playing in the lower reaches of women's football. So the picture is very, very mixed, and it's probably not a one-size-fits-all. You can't just say everything's really healthy and perfect in the women's game, because there are still a lot of infrastructural challenges that a lot of the players and teams face, which is, I think, the sign when things will really be getting healthy is when we reach not even a parity, but just an improvement and a greater respect for those teams. That it's very nice that the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Man City have broken through a barrier and reached a real commercial and financial height that has been unprecedented for women's sport, women's football. But we also need the rest of the WSL and indeed the rest of the women's football pyramid to be able to follow them.
And in terms, I mean, one of the reasons for that has always been, and it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? The argument that not enough people watch the women's game to justify the investment, to justify the funding, to justify the TV coverage, and then, because it's not on the telly, nobody can see it. But we saw record-breaking audiences in Basel last night, 34,000, I think. I mean, obviously, we had the success just 3 years ago, but do you think this particular tournament is going to make a difference in terms of getting bums on seats in stadiums around the UK?
Yeah, the feel around this tournament has felt very, very different in a number of ways. I think after the home Euros in 2022 was such a gigantic leap forward, because it was the first time that they'd done it. It was the home Euros, and that was when everything that we'd kind of dreamed of but never been able to expect had come in. You had them on chat shows, you had them getting magazine covers, sponsorship deals that were massive, and that was the biggest possible leap forward. And then this one, it felt far more normal to see the news delayed because the game had gone to extra time. It felt far more normal to see everybody talking about it, and it's very weird to be in that kind of after moment that we waited so long in women's football to the big breakthrough moment, and then it's happened, and culturally it's very kind of strange now to be, oh yeah, that is the normal thing. So where it goes after that is very hard to say, because there's no precedent for this in women's sport in this country, that so many women's sports over here are very much in their gathering investment, in their growth phase, or waiting for their big breaking out of the box moment. And the fact that that's happened already in women's football really just makes you feel that for the top players and the top teams, where's next? It does feel like the sky is the limit for that real selection of top teams and top players.
We're just watching those steps move up slowly to the plane. Those fans and all of us really excited to see that door open and to see the victorious Lioness team come out on the steps. And they're coming home, you know, to this heroine's welcome. There's going to be the big parade in London tomorrow. They're off to number 10 tonight. And also the King, the first one to say, you know, perhaps they could bring back the World Cup in a few years' time. And then Jeff Hurst tweeted today, let me just read you what he said. Congratulations to the Lionesses. The word team was mentioned many times last night, and that for me is the most important factor, as well as having a great leader, fantastic achievement. World Cup next. I mean, the pressure is being piled on their shoulders, isn't it?
It is. I think it's nothing new for them after the Euros. I think that's very much the world that they got used to living in, is going into tournaments and as favourites, or at least as second favourites, as I think they were in this one behind Spain. So that's something that they'll just have to get used to, and it's the world that they're living in now, as much as their world is now sponsorship deals and public interest and massive stadiums. So I don't think that sentiment is going to be a shock to them. I think it's something that's very much on their radar, having finished second at the last World Cup. So just the fact that other people now see that belief in them is probably very gratifying, but I don't think it changes the focus from their point of view, which has always been to be the best team in the world.
And also, the other thing that Jeff Hurst said was the word team, you know, being mentioned many times. And we talked about some of the individuals, and we've talked about Serena Wiegmann, but the fact is, it's how they played as a team that got them to this point.
It is, and I think one of the crucial things of being a team, and this is been the response from a lot of people have accused them of kind of riding their luck or being a lucky team, but it's all the constituent parts coming together, and it's ultimately if the team don't do their job in the first kind of 75 minutes, or then it's a very different situation for a Michelle Adjuman or a Chloe Kelly to come into. And even the impact that the players who have maybe not been around or on the bench or not starting are still part of that squad day to day in setting the culture and setting the tone. And that's been something that Serena Wiegman's been very clear on, that she's used the words New England quite a lot during the last year, and the idea that they're moving on from that England of Euro 2022, not only in terms of personnel but also maybe culture and style ever so slightly, because there has been so many changing personnel, changing expectations. So within that, obviously the individuals and the culture that they create is going to be a very, very foundational thing, and it's a culture that is kind of spearheaded by the captain's group of people like Leah Williamson, but also one that the players flesh out and feel themselves, which is why their response as a group to the abuse that Jess Carter suffered was something that they'd kind of led the way with and discussed among themselves, which speaks to the kind of foundation and feel that they've got among themselves.
And I know I've been quoting quite a few messages from X at you this morning, but this is one of my favourites actually. It's from someone called Maisie, who says, England won the Euros. Oh, here they come. And our best players were a goalie with no depth perception, a right back with a broken leg, a 19-year-old debut, and a cocky Londoner with a point to prove.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it's kind of a double-edged sword social media thing, because on the one hand, the tournament has spawned a lot of memes and a lot of in-jokes, and it's been stuff like Hannah Hampton with the tampons up her nose in the first penalty shootout because she was playing through a bloody nose, Lucy Bronze strapping her on leg, Chloe Kelly's shin pads. And the real strength of the online women's football community is that it does come up with those jokes and those in-jokes, and that culture that creates itself is a little bit more like the culture that you might get around a rock band, for example. It's not typical men's football Twitter, but it's far more creative and diverse and politicised and engaged. And yeah, I think that space that it's created online is really, really special. But obviously the flip side of that is that you've had a lot of detractors who have come out and either weaponised what Chloe Kelly's had to say about I'm really proud to be English, or they've kind of made really derogatory comments about the quality of women's football, and so much of it is just nonsensical, but it's obviously just draining to see. And I think that's been the only discouraging thing really, is that is still out in force, that sentiment that it's not worthwhile watching. But clearly the viewing figures being in their millions just shows that's kind of a not as widely held a view as social media will probably have you believe. And as Beth Mead's dad was saying, that who's having the last laugh in that situation, it's very clearly Beth Mead, the Lionesses, and all of the people who are able to find joy in women's football. Because if you're going to be cynical and sceptical about it, you're the only one that's missing out, because they've demonstrated that they're capable of producing such a great sporting story and a great moment for a nation that has been starved of success. So why you would want to willingly cut yourself off from that is beyond comprehension to me.
Just looking at those crowds that are gathered down there at Southend, I mean, they're probably not going to get any access to these players. They're outside the terminal, but they've come down anyway. We saw Chloe Kelly just coming off the plane there, a shrug of her shoulders, her arms out. She said to the cameras last night, the first time was so nice, we had to do it twice. There's a real swagger amongst these ladies today, isn't there, Katie?
There is, and just looking at the crowds there, this has kind of been almost the Lionesses' normal since winning the Euros the first time around. And it's very funny just to say it there, because I remember going to games, and other journalists will tell you this who've been covering the game for kind of 5-10 years, that you would go to games in very far-flung places and it would be you and one other person covering it, or the crowds of kind of a few hundred. And then after the Euros you win, you were getting this at every game of crowds lining up desperate to have pictures and autographs. And the women's game's a culture that's very accommodating of that players historically have always gone to sign autographs and pictures after games, and that has been a real point of engagement and a unique selling point, where the top men's players feel very far removed from that, but the women's players have always engaged in person or engaged online by talking about their own lived experiences of sexism or racism or whatever it is, in a way that helps them feel far closer to fans as well. So all of that, I think, adds to the real special community feel that's different from the men's game. But I mean, the Lionesses and their personality and swagger is very much, I mean, if you can't be like that after their achievement yesterday, when can you be?
Absolutely. Katie, we're just going to pause talking to you for a moment, because we're going to bring in Rachel Gould, who's the founder of Baller FC, and we're talking about community, Rachel, and you were set up, FC stands for Friends Collective, because you were tired of scouring the streets of London trying to find a pub showing women's football matches, and so you got together and created this organisation. How has it changed since 2020?
Well, I mean, the demand, in 2022, which was the first year that we started putting on watch parties for that particular Euros, the demand even since then has just grown and grown and grown. And, you know, yesterday we had 2 sold out events, one in London, one in Manchester. We had 700 people at each of those events, and we had a waiting list with sort of 800, 900 people on it. So at the moment, we just cannot keep up with the demand. You know, the passion around women's football, and particularly around the Lionesses, is huge. And, you know, we're just here to try and accommodate as many people as possible. And so many people want to celebrate it. It's just been an incredible run.
What did you make of last night's game?
I don't know. I keep texting my friends and people I know saying, was it just a dream? I mean, the last few games, particularly the quarter-final, then the semi-final, then yesterday, I mean, my heart, I don't think I could take much more of it. But it was just incredible. And, you know, the celebrations were amazing. It was euphoric. I've never seen anything like it. I'd love to do it all again. So we're going to the parade tomorrow, so we will do it. Do it again.
And I'm sure thousands more will be going down there as well.
Yeah.
We've seen all the players come off the plane now. They're into that terminal building. They're waiting for that. Oh, no, these are the latest pictures. Yeah, is this live or the latest? These are the latest pictures. They've already come out and they're on the terminal building. There's a red carpet outside that we're waiting for them to come out of. But when we look at all of these women, Chloe Kelly, Lucy Bronze, Leah Williamson, Hannah Hampton, Jess Carter, Michelle Adjiman, they are great role models, aren't they? There are a lot of young girls who are going to be wanting to play football, to be badgering their parents as the new season starts at grassroots levels this summer holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think the uplift that we saw after England winning the Euros in 2022, I think you could probably triple that, what it's going to be like now. The demand for, as you say, like little girls who want to join their local clubs at grassroots level. We have a huge grassroots community, both all over the country, but particularly in London and Manchester. You know, there's so much demand on pitches. We need more pitches for these teams, and hopefully we see, you know, numbers increase at all the professional clubs throughout the pyramid of the league. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens this season.
How hard is it at a grassroots level? You know, I've got 2 teenage boys. They love playing football at grassroots. There are girls' teams locally, but far fewer numbers than the boys. A lot of girls still playing with boys at a young age, but harder to get the numbers, to get whole teams together when they're very little, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there was the real push from Lotte Wubben-Moy and the England team after the last Euros to go to the government and say, you know, we want to make sure that girls can play football at school. And I think that is a really key part of bringing more people from all over the country, from all diverse backgrounds into the game. We need to get as many of our young girls into the game as possible to make sure that we keep having an England team like this.
We're just looking at the images from Southend Airport of the team all posing for photographs. Some of them looking quite emotional. I don't know if it's just very, very windy there, or if they're a little bit overwhelmed by the fact that so many fans have come down there to see them. Some talk about there possibly being a statue to commemorate this achievement. What do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely they deserve it. I mean, we've never had an England team England football team as successful as this. So, yeah, they absolutely should be commemorated. Very pleased for them.
And what about Serena Wiegmann? She's not British, but some people are saying, despite that, we should be giving her a damehood.
Well, I mean, you can see Serena there on the stamp behind me. You know, as far as we're concerned, she is the Queen of England. She's absolutely incredible. She deserves every accolade. You know, she's just been the most brilliant manager for England. And yeah, I think we need to absolutely recognise that.
Let's nip back to Katie Wyatt, women's football reporter at The Athletic. And we talked about it a little bit before, Katie, but the World Cup, it is on the horizon now. Do you think momentum is there for this team? Do you think that they can bring that home?
Very much so, yeah, the target's going to be on their back, but I think that they were always targeting that World Cup anyway. I think having come so close in the previous tournament, it was always going to be the aim to go back and get that. And that's the one thing that Serena Wiegand hasn't won as a manager on Internet.
Oh, good. Thank you.
He's done so many achievements with the back-to-back Euros, but then had 2 World Cup finals where she's finished second. So I think that is the one thing that she's going to be eyeing as a real final step as a manager. And there's probably clearly no better team to do it with because there's such a strong team in terms of their depth.
The Prime Minister too is amongst those who are congratulating them. He was talking with President Trump just a short while ago. He talked about their great mental and physical resilience, and they have really showed that, haven't they? You know, Lucy Bronze, we were just seeing her there in those pictures with her fractured tibia that she'd played anyway. I mean, it is just phenomenal, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know biologically how she managed to do that because that just kind of defies belief. But I think that's probably she's the kind of player where they would really have struggled to get her off the pitch just because of how dedicated she is and how much England means to her. And Serena Wiegand said in one of her post-game press conferences, and she's a manager who very rarely singles out individuals, but she said she's a player that you'll probably only get off the pitch in a wheelchair, and how prescient that turned out to be because that was in the end the circumstances almost that she came off in, that it was an injury that forced her off very late on in the game when she had no more to give, and even her really crucial penalty against Sweden in the quarter was one that was born out of tiredness. She said that her plan would never been to go down the middle because that's such a risky strategy, but she was just so exhausted that was the only kind of option left to her with the leg that she was dragging around. So I think it's been a real physical tournament that she's very much embodied, but it's also been one that Hannah Hampton is embodied as well, because obviously the iconic images of her saving penalties with tampons up her nose because she had a nosebleed in the quarterfinals is just going to be one of the abiding images of this tournament. So I think that there's probably a lot of physical and mental resilience in that squad that we've seen demonstrated in a number of ways.
A message that's just popped up on the Lionesses feed on X, just saying very simply, now it's home. Mirroring the words of the famous song, "Football's coming home, but it is home," and we're waiting to see them coming out of this door, walking out in front of the crowd. Katie, should we spare a thought for Spain? We haven't talked about them at all so far. I mean, they are the world champions. We've got to give them that, but they missed 3 penalties, never won the Euros. How hard a defeat was last night for them?
Yeah, I think the thing that really got to me about the Spain defeat was that they won the World Cup, and all of that afterwards was very much overshadowed by the kiss or the sexual assault on Jenny Hermoso and the court case and the protracted drama that emerged with all that, with the way that they were treated by the federation. So all of their success and their glory and all of the moments that they should have had a big boom moment like the Lionesses had in 2022, and they never got to have that because, one, they had to expend all of the emotional energy on fighting that, but then also all of the media coverage around that was overshadowed the actual achievement on the field. So I'm just distracted by this woman doing keep-uppers, but yeah, all of that was overshadowed what happened on the field. And I think that's the great shame for them, that they have had several golden generations, but now have a real golden generation in women's football, that Barcelona have dominated the game, the European game at club level, and then they've had a team that have impressed so often on the international stage, and even yesterday were probably the better team for very long portions of the game. So the fact that they haven't had that recognition is really, really gutting. But I read a lot of reports suggesting that a lot of things have changed for them at the federation. They went into the World Cup always battling for better conditions and battling for better treatment, very unhappy with the way that the head coach was treating them, and the way that they were able to kind of come together and really secure movement on that after the World Cup was a real victory for them. So the fact that there's so much more in place for them in terms of well-being and resource is something that I think that the players are very glad is in place compared to the last World Cup, because even though at the World Cup they were triumphant, there was a lot off the field that was overshadowing that.
Yeah, and also the size of the female football community as well. I mean, it's getting bigger, but it is still relatively small, isn't it? That there's clearly close friendships between team members from some of the teams last night and across the tournament as well. there aren't that many women still doing it at this level.
No, there's a lot of relationships in squads or across nations, and that's the same at club level. And part of that is probably why people online engage the way that they do, especially the LGBT community, see themselves represented in these players who are very open about their sexualities and who don't have to be figureheads in the way that I think the first men's footballer to come out would be in the Premier League. There's so many of them, and there is a real unity in the way that they all band together, and that's why women's football is a real space for gay communities and lesbian communities to really be themselves, because it's such a huge part of the culture, whether that's in the humour or the way that culture is really celebrated, and it's something that's really, really integral to it. So that's something that I think really makes the women's game unique, that in the men's game we don't have an out player. We often see gay used as an insult. We have very entrenched ideas among the fan base about masculinity and what that means and how it's performed, whereas in the women's game you see a lot of those kind of conventions subverted. You've got an England captain in Leah Williamson who talks about gender norms in the way that she dresses, how she likes to dress very masculinely. You've got players who are very open in there about their relationships with teammates or opposition players, and I think all of that creates a very accepting culture when it comes to sexuality as well.
And that's really interesting, isn't it, Katie? I wonder what you think. Do you think that this, because I think that is also much more obvious and open in this tournament than it was in the last Euros. Is this going to start making a difference on the men's game? Have we now reached a point where it's actually going to start, the female game is going to start influencing the male game?
I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, often that conversation comes up of why isn't there an out gay player? Well, there is one, obviously. There's Jake Daniels, who came out when he was just a teenager at Blackpool with the view of it not kind of dominating his whole playing career. We just wanted to come out, and that was the end of it. And whether that will ever happen at the top level is a really difficult thing, because given a lot of the attitudes that we see around masculinity in the men's game and around sexuality from among a fan base, whoever comes out and is the first to come out will know that they're going to have to deal with so much criticism on social media and so much abuse in the stands. And I think that there are some players who don't want to have to be a figurehead in that way. I think one thing about the women's game is because there are so many of them who are out and proud that whoever comes out can make very political statements about equality, but they're never alone and they're never the only one, whereas it's perfectly reasonable if you're a gay male athlete to say, I don't want to be the figurehead. I'm quite happy living in my private bubble, and I don't want to have all of the spokesperson, the responsibility that comes with being the first. And I think that Leah Williamson has, in an interview with GQ, said very similar things, that when it happens, it will happen, but you can't necessarily force on somebody that responsibility of being the first one. It's sometimes if they just want to live their life privately, that's fine as well.
And just thinking ahead to what's going to happen to the team now, they're going to come out of the airport, they're going to head off into central London to number 10. Some of them will have been there before. And then tomorrow we've got this big open bus celebration through the centre of London outside Buckingham Palace. How important is that for the team and also for the future of the game?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working with Beth Mead on her book, she said that after the parade it was a really strange thing, because that's the big final climactic moment, and you spend all summer with these people, working towards a really high stakes goal, and then it's just, right, bye, off we go, and that can be a really, really strange sensation in itself. But I think for a lot of these players will be the big recognition moment of what they've achieved and the impact that it's had at home, because when you're in the bubble of the tournament and a lot of these players weren't active on social media throughout the competition, you can't always judge the impact that it has back at home. You're very much confined to the fans in the stand, England fans that were able to travel, and any kind of news or snippet that reach you via your family or the FA or whoever it is that passes on that information. So when you are back in London, you see the fans lining up on the street, you see their eagerness to interact with you. That is when it's probably going to start to sink in about how much of an impact they've had on people at home. But it's part of the process of registering it all. I think it will probably be months and months for them adjusting to that new reality before it starts to feel real.
Yeah, and that will be tough for a lot of them, won't it? Because they have had such a focus. When you have an event like this, you train for it. This is the end point. And then what comes after that? The big anticlimax. What do they do for the rest of the summer?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. I think there's the adjustment of the increased profile. So after Euro 2022, players kind of said in half joking but half serious ways that they had to get used to being followed by paparazzi, and some of that was very comical. So Ella Toon made a joke yesterday about, I hope Michelle Adjman doesn't get papped eating a pasty, because that was one of the real iconic images that came out after the first Euros of she had her nails done and was leaving the nail salon eating a pasty in her hometown, and she had no idea that the paparazzi were there. And then you had them being photographed on holiday in Ibiza, and you had people paying for the meals or winding the windows down and shouting at them, and that feeling of being surveilled all the time is something that they've had to get used to. And the demand on their time as well, they'll be out for meals with family and friends, and they'll have people coming up to them wanting autographs, wanting pictures. They'll have people wanting to speak to them after the game, and that's something that clubs have had to manage. There have been a lot of clubs who have said players won't do autographs or selfies before or after matches because too many of them want their time. It's too dangerous. There have been scenes at clubs where people have been climbing on top of cars to get to players in car parks, and really dangerous, quite frightening scenes just because of the adoration that these players have inspired. So I think from players' management and agents and club levels are really aware of that now after the last Euros, so they'll be able to put things in place that will be able to manage that and mitigate that in a way that maybe it took them unawares last time. So that's going to be a massive thing, and I think any sort of psychological implications of the come down after such a huge achievement. They've had that experience, or a lot of them had that same experience after the 2022 Euros. So I'd like to think that there'll be things that they can put in place to manage it in a way. But a lot of this is probably going to come in waves as well. That there'll be the first Women's Super League games coming back. There'll be guards of honours, and there'll be presentations, and there will probably be presentations at Men's Premier League games when that resumes. So there'll be a lot of publicity that will draw it out for a while in terms of going on chat shows and magazine covers. So that bubble will kind of take a while to pop, and it will expand, and then it'll contract again, and then it'll pop again, and it will be a very longer, drawn-out process. And I think it's not just a case of the tournament's over and then it's done. There's probably a lot that goes into it for them.
Yeah, it is a really double-edged sword for many of them, isn't it? And with that extra scrutiny from the public, some good, some bad, also the possibility of sponsorship. And, let's be frank, these women are not paid anything like what the men are paid. The next few months is important for them in trying to build on what they've achieved financially.
Absolutely, yeah. And in the Euros, I remember speaking to agents in the aftermath of the last Euros win, and they were saying that was just an unprecedented level of interest, that they came into work on the Monday morning after the Euros win and were just inundated with inquiries from brands who had wanted to work with the Lionesses who had never been interested before, because a lot of women's sport before that Euros win was knocking on people's doors and asking them to be interested and asking them to buy into a vision that maybe brands couldn't see, because as we spoke about earlier, the whole thing about, does investment come before audiences, or do you have to have the audiences there to attract the investment? All of that conundrum, I think some brands were a little bit reticent to invest in women's football because they couldn't see the bigger picture. But now very much that is off the table. And I remember speaking after last year with agents who said that their deals were kind of rivaling a lot of the men's England players for some of the bigger brands. So that is obviously really, really impressive. But it's important for these players because the on the pitch earnings are not necessarily going to be enough for them to retire off of. It's a very different financial picture to what you see in the men's games. But I think one of the crucial things about sponsorship deals is that at the moment those are kind of confined to the Lionesses, and even then there's probably a hierarchy within where it's the better known Lionesses that will be really reaping the benefits of that. So to see those filter across other teams in the WSL or lesser known players in the WSL will be a really nice thing. I think it'd be nice if brands invested in the potential and the future of the women's game as a whole, because they've had just an enormous reminder of its potential, and that's been realised on such a big stage that they shouldn't need any more tempting to get involved.
And in terms of the fact you're right, there are the big names. We've got our Beth Meads and our Chloe Kellys and Hannah Hampton and Michelle Adjman really come through in this particular tournament. But people like Michelle, who are young, how hopeful are you about the team for the next Euros, the team for the next World Cup? How big a churn do you think there would have to be in the team before that time? How many of these women are women who are really pushing it at one end of their career, and how many have got a good few years ahead of them?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, there's somewhere Alessia Russo, for example, is the one that Michelle Adjman's going to have to unseat for a starting berth in the Euros, and she's very much laid out a trajectory of or a blueprint of how to do it, because Alessia Russo was that bit part star super sub at the last Euros, and now her and Ella Toon are starting players. So
Oh, I think we might have lost Katie. Katie, can you hear us?
Sorry. I can hear you, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
sorry, we just lost a bit. You were just talking about Alexia Rousseau and the difference between the last Euros and this one.
Yeah, those players still have a lot longer to go before they retire, but they'll be probably somewhere we might see them withdraw from the England squad in the next couple of years ahead of the kind of end of their international careers. So I think that there will be probably a little bit of movement, but it's still a lot of those figures, the Hannah Hamptons, the Sarah Adjumans, are probably going to have a number of other tournaments before it's time for them to kind of retire.
And how long will they get off after this? You know, they've obviously got the celebrations of the next few days, and as you said, then the summer ahead of them, trying to get sponsorship deals, just dealing with how they've changed, you know, in terms of the amount of attention that they're going to get. But how long will they take a break from training, or is it pretty much going to be, you know, in the next few days, back to getting up early and back to keeping their fitness levels up?
Oh, they'll have hopefully some well-deserved holidays, and that's something that we saw. Things like the last year is that you saw these players going on the holidays and being tracked by paparazzi, which was a very new experience for them, having never had to endure that as female athletes. So yeah, you will definitely see some holiday pictures. And I think last year, Beth Mead was talking about being on holiday with Vivianne Miedema, who is her partner, obviously Dutch striker, and having people coming up to them and playing for their meals and stuff, and that was a totally new experience for them. So yeah, we're definitely probably going to see a lot of holiday pictures and a lot of nice moments that they'll have with bumping into England fans away from home.
We've talked a lot about the team. We've not talked that much about the fans, although there's some down there. But of course, all the fans that travel out there, not a particularly cheap place to go and visit. A lot of people spend a lot of money to get out there. They've showed sort of, you know, great determination, great support. And we saw Jess Carter talking about what she's gone through during this tournament, the racist abuse that she's received online, and how it was the fans, really, she said. It was the fans, her family and her teammates that helped her get back on the pitch. She wasn't sure, she said, she could ever get back on the pitch, but it was partially the fans and their really warm support that have surrounded this team. That's got to help them on the pitch, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that was such a real credit to Jess Carter.
Oh, I think we've lost Katie again.
Sorry,
she's back.
It's because I keep getting phone calls through. Sorry, it's very in demand.
You're just too popular.
Yeah, I think Jess Carter played one of the best games at the tournament yesterday, and for her to come out with the statement that she did and then come out afterwards yesterday so that she was scared to play that game because of all the abuse that she had received. So for her to expose herself and be so vulnerable like that is just, can't imagine what strength that would have taken to do so at a major tournament. And obviously she's come out on top with that, but I'm glad that she felt that there were a number of fans that were supporting her and behind her, because I'm glad that she felt that there were a number of fans behind her, because it's probably a very lonely place when you're one of the only ones experiencing that as a tournament.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, it has been a very white team in the past. That does seem to be changing, though.
It does, yeah, and I'd like to think that this is something that's probably going to improve long term, because the FA are putting a lot of things in place for this. That there's various different pathways that they're implementing, trying to get stuff more into inner cities more, or trying to make things a little bit more accessible in terms of transport for underrepresented communities, because part of the reasons we were talking earlier about the scale of parental commitment that women's football historically has been very white is because it's been so inaccessible, that it's been something that you had a lot of regional talent centres closing down and not being replaced by anything, so you couldn't get people in those inner city environments into a place where they could become women's footballers, because they just weren't able to physically get to these places. So that's been something that the FA have been very conscious of trying to address, but it's going to be something that will be a kind of 10-15 year project, where they've done a lot of things, where they've brought out these things called emerging talent centres that are kind of going to be maybe a little bit more close to people. They don't want people to have to travel more than 50 minutes to get to somewhere to play football. So that's a real enormous thing for them, and hopefully that's going to be something that increases the diversity of the England squad so that it represents everybody.
Well, yes, because there is the phrase, you can't be it if you can't see it. And so people like Jess Carter and Michelle Adjuman will have hopefully planted a seed in some young girls' minds watching this. But why do you think that is the case, that for example, we do see a lot more men of colour coming through the male game from a very, very low level, but far fewer girls?
Yeah, well, part of it is because in the men's game, a lot of the academies are kind of a lot more accessible, but there's a lot more resource that's put into getting boys who need it to Premier League clubs, because there's so much more money in the game, there's so much more resource in the game that they've got the capacity to do that. And May Letizia, she's a white player, but her dad was making this point when I spoke to her, that they lived in Guernsey, so they were spending £15,000 a year on travel to get her from the Channel Islands, obviously, over to England to train with the Hampshire FA and to play football. So that is just shows how maybe sparse some provision for women's football has been, and why that. Obviously, that financial barrier that needs to be overcome, whereas in the men's game, if there's a talented young player, they're pulling out all of the stops of putting on taxis, of putting on travel to get that player in, because the financial payoff is going to be so much higher. So all of that is probably a big factor in why there's probably been far fewer women players of colour. But there's probably also cultural elements to it as well. There's ideas of who should and who shouldn't be playing football, of what playing football means and the social implications of that in some cultures. So I think changing attitudes is a real big part of that as well. So there's many different constituent parts that go into that.
Slightly linked to that, I suppose, was the other news announced this weekend that they're going to make a sequel to Bend It Like Beckham. Of course, that film was 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
And that. 22.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that a film which touched on so many of those issues, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was a film where, I spoke to the director not long ago. She was doing something involved with women's cricket, and that was, I think, at such a film when it touched on so many things. It was cultural, it was sport, it was sexuality. There were so many different things, and they're very surface level. The themes are very close to the surface in that it's very obvious and easy to analyse, which is probably a big part of why it resonated with so many people, because it was done in such an overt way. But there were so many people who saw themselves in that film, whether it was seeing Jasmine, a sporting hero who looked like them for the first time, or whether it was just seeing women's football on television and knowing about the college system in America. It was a film where there's so many sports people, not just footballers, but sports people, who will say that film was just a game-changing thing for them. And I'm just very intrigued to see what they'll do with the sequel in a cultural landscape and a women's football landscape that is so different to what it was all those years ago.
Well, we're going to take a quick pause, Katie. We're going to take a commercial break, and you can pretty much guarantee that when we do that, the England fans will come out of that on that red carpet. And if we do, we'll hopefully come straight back to it. But thanks so much for your perseverance, Katie. We will take a small break, but we'll be back at Southend Airport in just a couple of moments. Don't go anywhere.
Great, thank you so much.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. Let's just show you the live images from Southend Airport, where the victorious Lionesses team touched down about 45 minutes ago or so, along with their fantastically spangly Euros trophy. We're looking now at crowds who've gathered down there in the car park. Lots and lots of youngsters down there, of course. This is gloriously timed to coincide with the summer holidays. You might be able to make out Jill Scott down there. It looks like she's signing balls. Some people have been taking selfies with her. She's, of course, a former England footballer who appears to have been travelling with the team. Lots and lots of youngsters down there. We've seen flags, shields, someone's got a drum, lots of chants of footballs coming home, enormous excitement in the sunshine down there as the team have touched down with their trophy. Lots and lots of youngsters. It's lovely to see just as many young boys as there are young girls really excited about this England victory and about the Lionesses coming home. We've seen all the team come off the plane. Chloe Kenny, Lucy Bronze, Leah Williamson, captain. Second time that she's brought the European trophy back to the UK. Chloe Kelly very much swaggering off that plane, looking ever so pleased with herself. 110 kilometres an hour was how fast her penalty was last night. Should be said that that is faster than the most powerful shot in the men's Premier League last season. I'll just leave that fact there with you. But she is a penalty taker extraordinaire, really showed nerves of steel yesterday. This is a woman who said that she might quit football at the start of the year. Also seeing Michelle Adjiman, what an inspirational figure, the young player of the tournament. She was awarded last night, and this is all the team posing in front of the plane just after they touched down a short time ago. Lucy Bronze, we should shout out to her as well. She kept on playing despite the fact that she had a fractured tibia. Jess Carter kept playing despite the racist abuse that she'd put up with from fans. And Hannah Hampton, what an extraordinary goalkeeper. Really amazing saves from her last night. She also had to face the scrutiny of Mary Earps retiring, and the fact that Mary Earps has been such a fantastic and key part of the team. Plus the fact that she grew up with an eye issue, which meant that she didn't have full vision, but still managed to put in an extraordinary performance last night. And then we saw her there in some of those images. Serena Wiegmann bringing her third European victory, described as the greatest asset we've got by Katie Wyatt a short time ago. Ruthless, pragmatic. What is her secret? Well, she certainly has a plan, not afraid to use subs. Now the question is, can she bring the World Cup home too? That's certainly a question that has been slightly posited by the King and also others, including Sir Geoff Hurst, who in his congratulations to the team a little bit earlier today talked about how the word team was mentioned many times last night. That for him, he said, is the most important factor, as well as having a great leader. And this group of women certainly showed that they can put in a performance as a team. What a fantastic achievement. Sir Geoff Hurst said, of course, the England World Cup winner from 1966. But he said, World Cup next. So, yeah, that's certainly the gauntlet has been laid down for this team. It is going to be in Brazil in 2027. Geoff Hurst and the King amongst many keeping their fingers crossed. So the team now are presumably just going through all of the customs checks that they need to go through before they come out at Southend Airport to see these fans here, and then they're going to travel into the centre of London, where they're going to head to a reception at Downing Street with Angela Rayner and Stephanie Peacock, and then preparations will begin for a parade through central London tomorrow. They were celebrating last night into the wee small hours, and I imagine that they will be celebrating again this evening after that reception at Downing Street, as will all the fans who've come out to see them. We're going to keep an eye across all of this, but we're going to take you to Darren McCaffrey next. He's got Business Live after this break.
Sit down at the bar.
He's gonna be on one. Yeah, it's like how long do we leave it before we pull out?
I'm also on now.
They've just said, is it worth knocking it off as an as live? Because my concern is they're going to come out when I'm live and at 6 o'clock. That's going to look bizarre. But we don't want to miss
If I move
the
that
shot.
to an as live though, I can still miss the shot.
Yeah, I know.
I think we give it 10 more minutes.
Okay. Well, they're going. Oh, whoops. Just. No.
Alice will stop. If they come out, everyone will go once they come out.
We can stick it over there in that corner.
There's a car right in front. I have no idea what's...
Again, we've asked them like 5 fucking times now.
Why we're not just doing a live top and a live bottom, I've got no idea.
We should have brought our tents in for camping and all this.
This is ridiculous. It's not waiting. My batteries are going to die in a moment.
If I had the Z90, I would have to change batteries twice by now.
Boxes to go in, so we're going to have to.
And hundreds of fans have turned out at Southend Airport to greet the team after that extraordinary game yesterday against the Spanish, and which again went to penalties, and well, they didn't make it easy for the nation, did they? But in it went the crucial penalty, and they have been celebrating ever since, and they are now, they flew from Zurich to Southend Airport, arrived, I have to say, some time ago, but it is clear now that they have, they arrived in tracksuits and team kit, and they've obviously been off to change into the attire with which they will go now straight to Downing Street for a reception event at Downing Street. And I'm just trying to work out, they're going to drive from Southend Airport to Downing Street. They're going to be late. That's the first thing I can say. It was expected at around 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock. But it is now looking more like around 6:30. There they are. Not going over to the fans. The fans have been waiting a long time at Southend Airport, and they're singing and celebrating, and they've no doubt got their pictures, but they are in a bit of a hurry, the team, and they are off, or will be off any moment now, to Downing Street. And Downing Street has been, well, festooned in the pictures I've seen with St George's flag, and they will have a celebration there, no doubt, in the Downing Street garden if it's a fine evening. But it is the only the beginning, really, of the celebrations. And tomorrow morning they will have the bus top ride through London. But for now, they are concentrating on getting themselves to Downing Street, where they will be welcomed by the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and also the Sports Minister.
you filming?
Just for irony purposes.